It's Monday night.
I've been in the game a long time. When a catcher catches the ball and it's strike three, you call the guy out. It's that simple, isn't it?
And if it's Monday, it's the knee jerks.
I'm not going to sit here and rip umpires. But you saw what you saw, clearly saw what you saw. I just saw it for the 10th time. Write it and say something once in a while. Have the nerve to say something.
Detroit sports talk with attitude.
Attitude on three. 1, 2, 3. Attitude.
Coming up tonight, will Big Al guess whose birthday it is? Who are the jerks of the week? What will Eno rant about now? The answers coming up next. Two guys who know Detroit sports. The voice of reason, Greg Eno and Big Al Beaton.
It's December 2nd, 2018. We're now 25 years into the Detroit Lions not having won a division title, and that also means it's time for the Knee Jerks, Detroit Sports Talk with Eno and Big Al. I'm the Big Al of the equation, longtime Detroit-based podcaster and blogger, Al Beaton. Joining me, as always, is the man who knows a lot of things about a lot of things. He's a Renaissance man, and that would be Greg Eno. What's up, Greg?
I've never been called a Renaissance man, but I'll take it. Al, thank you so much for that introduction. I am Greg Eno from my Out of Bounds WordPress blog, also my Winged Wheeler blog, also on WordPress, which is about the Red Wings and all things hockey. Had a piece there this weekend on Dan Maloney, so check that out, the Winged Wheeler. You can follow me on Twitter at Greg Eno. Follow the Knee Jerks on Twitter at the Knee Jerks, and of course, our Facebook fan page is facebook.com/the Knee Jerks. And we have a group that we don't. I mean, we're trying to revive the group. It's called the Knee Jerks group on Facebook. Maybe we'll try to revive that. It's been kind of quiet. You can check us out there as well. But anyway, we've got some Lions and Tigers on the docket, and we also have a special surprise at the end of the show. I'm not even going to tell Al about.
Oh boy!
At the end of the show. We'll have some fun with that. And but before we get to any of that, Al, why don't you tell us how people can find the podcast?
As always, we are on iTunes, as is every other podcast in the universe. So just search the Knee Jerks, Eno and Big Al. The Knee Jerks is usually enough for it to find it. We're also on Stitcher. Again, search for the keywords the Knee Jerks. Stitcher is available on pretty much every, if you use iOS, if you use Android, if you use a PC, if you use a Mac, you can get Stitcher either through an app or the browser, Stitcher.com. Look for the Knee Jerks. And, of course, we're on YouTube. Look for the Knee Jerks on YouTube. Please subscribe. Please give us thumbs up. You know, if you want to see our aging mugs, whatever.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you can actually put faces to the voices you've been listening to all these years. So again, iTunes, Stitcher, and of course YouTube. And of course you can also go to our Libsyn page straight there and just download the show from there as well. If you use the kneejerks.com, it should take you right to it. All right, anything else? Well,
before we get to the agenda, let's play a game we like to call Whose Birthday Is It, Maestro?
We baked you a birthday cake. If you get a tummy ache and you moan and groan and woe, don't forget we told you so. Happy birthday! Happy birthday!
Everybody knows how we play this game by now. I'll give Al a clue or two or three of an individual whose birthday it is today in the world of sports, and if Al can correctly guess that person within the first two clues, they receive the home version of Matching 73.
Oh, boy.
You get to play. You get to be Gene Rayburn, Rick Dawson, Fannie Flagg, all rolled up into one.
Oh, geez. No, let's see. I think it'll be Tom Poston. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, how's that for pulling one out of my rear?
Kudos. This person now made his name in football, the NFL. He was born on this date in 1940. So he's 78 years old today. He was a Hall of Fame player. I will say that. He was a multiple champion in the NFL, and he was played on defense. And I will tell you that he wore the silver and black. Silver and black.
Okay, which When was he born again? I'm part. What was that again? 1940. Okay, all right. So, and he played defense. Oh, geez. I'm just trying to think of. Most of the guys that come to mind when it comes to the Raiders are guys from the 70s and 80s. The Lyle Alzados of the world, who's been long dead and things like that. So, but then again, I could be going off on a wrong tangent anyway. So, oh, good Lord, Charles Davis.
No.
Nope. Like I said, I was thinking guys more from the 70s and 80s, but I had to throw something out there to keep the show underway. So, all right, with that, then I'm sure Greg will see if he can give me a gimme on number 2. If I need number 3, then we're in really, really big trouble. So, all right, with that, I think we got ready to hit the ground running when it comes to our topics. So we're trying to have a shorter show. We're getting those started a little later than we usually do. For our recording purposes. So we're going to pretty much stick to the Lions and Tigers because they've got the most going on right now. And there's a lot going on with the Lions, Greg. Since we last spoke, there's been 2 more losses. The Lions lost to the division-leading Bears on Thanksgiving Day to a career backup. Chase Daniel dropped a 36-22 loss. Lions were competitive. A couple of Matthew Stafford turnovers in the fourth quarter pretty much clinched it for the Bears. Today, we're recording this Sunday night. Earlier this afternoon, the Lions stayed competitive with the NFL-leading Rams for about 3 quarters, but the defense ran out of gas. The offense remained in ultra-conservative, 3 yards in a cloud of turf mode, except the cloud of turf is like throwing it 3 yards, not running it 3 yards. They lost 30-16. The team is now 4-8. And struggling mightily. The season is essentially over. I mean, for them to make the playoffs at 8-8, actually, if you heard me at the beginning of the podcast, the Lions were today were eliminated from contention for the division title, which means their only chance is the wild card. And to get the wild card in 8-8, they would need about 300 things to go right, and that ain't happening. So season's over. They're tracking towards double-digit losses after going 9-7 last year with much the same personnel. So, I'm not sure if I want to start pointing pointing fingers of blame, Greg. So we're going to hear it. It's Stafford's fault. It's Patricia's fault. It's Cooter's fault. That's going to be a big one over the next week. It's Bob Quinn's fault. Hell, it's the Ford's fault. It's always been the Ford's fault for the last 60-some years. I hear all this stuff about there's a culture change and things like this, and that's why the team is taking a step back because they're going to get better over the next couple years. The problem is, as a fan of this team since I was like 9 years old, 1970, I've been hearing it's going to be next year or bear with us for a couple years for the last 50 years. And it's frustrating as hell to hear. And I think there's plenty of blame to go around because Patricia made a lot of weird coaching decisions today. Bob Cooter's offense is stuck in the 70s. Matt Stafford is playing like a rookie. And Bob Quinn, a lot of his personnel moves have essentially failed. So there's a lot of blame to go around. I don't think fixing one of these is going to turn his team around. It's going to be a collaborative effort.
There's really no quick fix. We talked about Quinn last time about how he certainly should not get a free pass. He seems to be being treated with kid gloves though by the media. Nobody's really gone after him. You mentioned last time we talked about how Quinn has been persona non grata. Very cloaked in the shadows, as far as not talking to anybody, not publicly making any comments about the season and so forth. And despite, as we talked about again, the moves that were made, and that be that as it may, that's really that's second place to what the real deal is, which is that I think the Lions need to make a serious. Albeit, I don't know, as you pointed out in the show notes, I don't know how serious they can be, but they need to make some sort of they need to come to come to Jesus meeting about the whole Matthew Stafford thing. I mean, we're 10 years into his tenure here. I know that I understand there's been people have been traded. I understand people have been injured. I understand offensive line people have been going down with injuries and so forth, but and I understand that they're financially they're really almost anchored to him. But when I say come to Jesus about Matthew Stafford, I'm talking about seriously thinking about drafting his potential replacement. They haven't drafted a quarterback eons. Certainly not anybody that would be remotely considered as anybody who would be the future. If they've ever drafted quarterbacks, it's been it's just going to be training camp fodder for the most part. Maybe would be playing for either a practice squad position or possibly a backup position, but certainly nobody, even with Rudock, nobody that you really got the feeling that this was going to be the heir apparent. And I understand that there's a lot of money invested in Stafford. That's a big part of it. But you have to begin, I think, the conversation about, not just going to every draft thinking, okay, well, we're not going to draft a quarterback. That's the one position we're not going to draft. I think the Lions need to have serious talk about who the quarterbacks are coming out into the draft and where they could possibly land one. I know this is probably a conversation it's not going to be very fruitful. I hesitate even to bring it up because of the contract situation with Stafford. But this whole offensive, the whole thing is just. You mentioned the coaching. We'll get into the coaching decisions in a second. But I just don't, Al. I just don't see what. I just don't see it happening with Matthew Stafford. I just don't see it happening. I'm sorry. And I just think that it's time to, I don't know how many more years are going to go by before he would even be not the quarterback of the Lions. Maybe he's going to be the quarterback for the Lions in the next 4 or 5. Maybe he'll be here for 15 years when all is said and done. And absolutely nothing will have been accomplished. No playoff victories, nothing in 15 years. This is year 10. This is year 10. Now, do you actually see in 5 years the Lions making any sort of? How can you say that when they haven't made any noise in 61 years? How can you say that in the next 5 they're going to take that next step? How can you say after 10 years of Matthew Stafford that in year 12 in the Stafford era that's when they're going to make them? How do you move on from a guy that you've got so much money invested in? I know there was rumors about a trade with Jacksonville. Peter King apparently had that. I think it was Peter King. Somebody had that rumor about. But that would be. I tell you what, if they could actually pull off a trade for him, that would be heaven sent. I think that would be good for everybody. It would be good for him. It would be good for the Lions. It would be good for the team that gets him. But if they can find a team, a sucker that would take Stafford off their hands and allow the Lions to just start from scratch, I think the fans in this town would be happy with anybody else at this point. I mean, I know that the problems with the team are vast and varied, and they go beyond just the quarterback. But I don't think we'll get a lot of tears that'll be shed. They would have gone from him.
Well, then let's, before we get into some of the coaching decisions we wanted to talk about, let's talk about Stafford, as that's been a very hot topic considering what's at stake. And that would be considering, millions and millions and millions of dead cap money. And that leads us to, is it even feasible to deal Matthew Stafford after this year or move on? Stafford's been mediocre to bad, especially since Golden Tate was traded. Look at the numbers since Golden Tate was traded. I was going through them this afternoon. 6.5 yards per attempt. That's awful. His interception to touchdown ratio was even. It's 1-1. He's got 5 TDs, 5 interceptions. He's had 4 fumbles. He is not top 90 on passer rating since the Seattle game. That's 5 games ago. So the cries that maybe it's time to, as you said, maybe it's time to move on from Stafford are going to get louder and louder. And you also have to wonder if the Lions' brain trust is beginning to think the same thing, which would be a very hard pill to swallow, considering he's in year 1 of a 5-year deal.
Yes.
Yeah. and that's
how do you get out from under that?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Right now, there's 4 years, $84 million left on the deal, and it'd be a staggering amount of dead cap money involved. If they trade him, they would suffer a $30 million cap hit. if he's cut, if they decide, we're just going to move on, $49 million they would lose off the cap. Would just be lopped right off their cap. It would be dead money. So that leads us to the sunk cost fallacy. Money's already spent, either or. If you determine that Stafford's not going to be a good mix for the new coaching staff going forward, you just cut your losses, bite the bullet for a year, look for your quarterback in the draft, and roll with him for a year. And because a lot of ways that's how the Lions got screwed to begin with, because Stafford was one of the last of the rookie quarterbacks who was signed under the pre-draft slotting rules, where they could get whatever they could get. So in a lot of ways, Matt Stafford may become the football player who makes the most money ever, just because of his draft status. So that's the thing. It's sunk cost at this point. You have to either decide we're going to change offensive coordinators, see if that does anything, if that helps us in any way, or you bite the bullet, take the $50 million or $30 million cap hit and decide on what you do. And the other fact is you have to find a trading partner, such as it's gotten to the point where, Peter King, the Monday morning quarterback writing for NBC Sports, actually threw a Jacksonville trade out there, saying a first and a fourth for Stafford, but again the Lions would have enough cap money they'd choke on it. There's that much. That's the thing. It's pure and simple sunk cost. If you think he's not the guy, then you probably are best to move on and then just take the hit for a year, because if you're moving on from Stafford anyway, it's a full rebuild. It's not going to make a difference, I think, how much cap room you have, because if you move on from Stafford, you're saying, okay, we're not going to be ready to go for a couple years at least. So maybe if Stafford isn't the man, you choke on the money and deal with it for a year.
He's been so not good lately. Mm-hmm. He looks like a guy who's just lost his confidence. And, the regression. It's not, Al. It's not just, and I don't want to hear about the receivers are injured, and I don't want to hear about the offensive line and the running game. He's just missing. He's missing passes. He's underthrowing guys. He's fumbling the ball. Usually at crucial moments. He's throwing interceptions at bad moments. The regression this year. And it really started on opening night. Against the Jets with the 5 interceptions, how many you threw that day. And it hasn't really gotten all that much better. And the regression he has shown is shocking. I remember writing a piece last year or 2 years ago about kind of praising Jim Bob Cooter and say, boy, if Jim Bob Cooter, or maybe it was last year, if Jim Bob Cooter could be the guy that finally unlocks the mystery of Matthew Stafford, boy, is he really going to be able to write his ticket in NFL coaching circles. And Cooter, I'm down on him too. I mean, his play calling is it goes back and forth between being pretty clever to being atrocious. He's very. I said it today on Twitter. I said he's a schizophrenic coordinator. Mm-hmm. He'll pull these things out of the bag that are just wow, what a great call. And then he'll do these things like screen pass on 3rd and 16, a draw play on 2nd and 12. I mean, I don't know. They're boring. They're not. There's so much going on with this team that's just bad, and they're probably going to finish maybe 5-11, 6-10. Mm-hmm. At this juncture, they go to Buffalo, they go to Minnesota. I'm sorry, they go to Buffalo, they go to
Arizona.
They're home to Minnesota, and they're home. No, they go to. And
here, I got the schedule right here. It's at the Cardinals, at the Bills, and then
home to Minnesota,
and at Packers. So they only have one home game left out of the 4. Hard to believe the season's almost over at this point. Yeah. There's only 4 games left to play.
I don't know where to begin. I mean, I really don't know where to begin. At the top of the discussion, you said who's to blame. I don't know. I mean, there's so many guilty parties here. I can't. Patricia he's curious, to say the least, with some of this.
Well, now when we're talking about Patricia, then bring up Patricia. Let's bring up some of the oddball coaching decisions that we saw today, and which has kind of been par for the course with him. First, in this game against the Rams. It was obvious they were going with a very conservative game plan because it's pretty obvious the Rams are far more talented than the Lions, and they were going in, it looks like, with a plan to try and milk clock as much as they could. Unfortunately, it made for, as you know, you mentioned schizophrenic type play calling. It led to some very odd decision making. Like late in the first half, they were frustratingly conservative. They had all their timeouts and there was 2 minutes 30 seconds left on the clock. They ran the ball between the tackles twice, and then they gave up a sack. So the Rams still got the ball. They only burned a minute off the clock. Rams got the ball back a minute 30, kicked the field goal. Another one later in the third quarter. Lions run a draw play on 3rd and goal from the 19. If there's anything that's more infuriating to anybody who knows even a little bit about football, is waving the white flag on 3rd and long, specifically in the red zone, because you're still going to be in field goal range, especially with Prater's leg. If he's sacked anyway. So, and then what got weirder though, especially specifically about they went so conservative, then they try an onside kick.
Yeah.
So that's the sort of thing that. And then the onside kick was butchered because it didn't even go 10 yards, which then gave the Rams great field position. They went on and converted another field goal. So they were gifted another 3 points there. Then things got even weirder was, over the past few years, if there's one thing the Lions could hang their hats on, is that when time was going, fourth quarter, the Lions had a great up-tempo offense, especially 4-minute offense, 2-minute offense. That team was able to drive down the field and make games interesting, and win a lot of games. Well, this one, I don't think I've seen very many. They're down 2 scores, 7 minutes left to go, and they take a time-consuming 4-minute drive. They huddle every play, nothing up-tempo, and then they ultimately have to settle for a field goal after milking 4 minutes off the clock, and you're still down a score and you need a touchdown.
Right.
And then the last one that got me, the defense was playing. I think the defense far outplayed the offense. For the most part, they held the Rams' high-flying offense very much in check. Right. Okay, Lions pull within a score. They still have 2 timeouts. The Lions try another onside kick rather than seeing if their defense could get a stop. Obviously, the onside kick fails. Another one, they just kicked it straight ahead, recovered. And which is nothing. Onside kicks are become such a low percentage thing now because players don't get a running start. So the Rams got great field position again, insurance TD. So as you said, that's very schizophrenic. They're super uber conservative with a lot of play calling. Then they're pulling stuff out of their hat like these 2 onside kicks. That's kind of hard to put my head around, and it makes you wonder that, especially Patricia being a defensive coach, again said he didn't trust his defense to get a stop.
The onside kick, Al, when you were, I think it's 2:54, just under 3 minutes left.
Right, about 2:54. You're right.
Right, when you had all 3 timeouts plus a 2-minute warning, so essentially 4 timeouts.
Yeah, they had 4 timeouts. You're right.
And even Chris Spielman couldn't defend that call. Yeah. All that did was give the Rams an excellent opportunity to go up by 2 scores, and of course they did in terms of the touchdown. But that was the one that really was egregious to me. I don't know why you wouldn't kick it deep. You've got the 4 timeouts. You try. If you're going to get beaten, then get beaten on a long field. It's not like in baseball where you don't dare pitch to a good hitter with first base open. I mean, they always say don't get beaten don't let certain players beat you. And if you're going to get beaten at the end of the game by an offense, make them drive, make them get some first downs. Make them. I mean, instead of putting them in a scenario where all they have to do is essentially get 10 to 15 yards and they're in field goal range, and then put you back down by 2 scores again. When you've got, again, 4 timeouts, 3 timeouts, and a 2-minute warning to work with. Mm-hmm. That was bad. That was just a bad decision. I mean, that's just bad. You mentioned how infrequently onside kicks are to be successful to begin with.
And they're even less successful now because of the new rules.
And the schizophrenia was earlier too, in the third quarter when they got the touchdown to, not the touchdown, when they made that curious draw play like you were talking about, 3rd and 19, very conservative, like you said, already in field goal range. Why not? Try to move the ball through the air, whatever. Then schizophrenia was, and still kickoff, they onside it again, which I don't know what that was all about. If they're trying to go for the element of surprise or whatever, when you've got a team that when you're playing an offense, Al, that's that high octane. I don't care how well your defense has been playing. It's a high octane offense. Why give them short field? Why give them short field? Why? The clock management at times has been odd this year, Al. Not taking timeouts when they probably should, taking timeouts when they shouldn't. Stafford looks lost anyway out there. I mean, he looks like a rookie quarterback. It's just a real mess. And Patricia, there's two things we've talked about so far that are probably not going to happen anyway. We've talked about Stafford. Well, you and I both know they're not going to cut Stafford. They're not going to. They're not going to move on from Stafford because of the money involved. To talk about that, I guess, is wasted air. And they're not going to fire Patricia after 1 year. So there's two things that are not going to happen right off the bat. Those are two things that fans in Detroit wouldn't mind seeing, but those are two things that are not going to happen.
Right.
They're not going to move on from it. They're not going to hire a coach. And frankly, I kind of get it. You don't fire a guy after 1 year. I can kind of live with that. Hope that he's going to grow into the job, both from a maturity standpoint, from a football head coaching standpoint. You give him some time maybe to prove that he's not just an overglorified coordinator like so many guys have been in the NFL, not just him. I'll buy that. I will. I mean, if they bring him back, which they will, I'll buy that. But what I won't buy is the media just refusing to take Bob Quinn to task for bringing in this guy who was supposed to lead the Lions, to the next step. And you and I have no idea if what Jim Caldwell would have done with this squad. I have no idea. Right. I couldn't tell you. But this has not been the way this was supposed to work. It started on opening night. I thought opening night was an aberration. I thought opening night was an anomaly. I thought opening night was just one of those weird things that happens in the NFL. It turns out that was just that's who they were essentially. Not that bad, but that's how the season was going to go. Was opening night. I thought opening night was going to be just a bad dream. It happened. The good thing it happened on opening night. Get it out of the way. It turns out that was essentially the trendsetter for the whole year, the pace setter.
Right. Yeah. Then essentially what you're saying is, they're not going to cut ties with Stafford because there's too much money at stake. Quinn and Patricia are essentially tied at the hip, and they're going to get at least a couple years to implement whatever it is they want to do. So essentially, it's Bob Cooter is going to be the sacrificial lamb, because at this point, he's the only one you can realistically get rid of, and that the fan base will approve of, and won't cost you any money. I mean, that's the way things are looking. That's pretty much all what they have to do, because the defense is, they've had their issues, but they are on the uptick, so to speak. I mean, I think no one expected them to do what they did to the Rams today. Jared Goff looked pretty much human today. I mean, considering this is the team that set the world on fire in that Monday night game against the Chiefs and beat them in one of the highest scoring games in NFL history. And they come and play the Lions, and even though they ended up putting up 30 points, that offense was pretty much held in check by the Lions' defense. So that's got to be credit to Patricia and Paul Pasqualoni, the defensive coordinator. But the offense has become the Achilles heel of this team, which no one saw coming. So if I'm Bob Cooter, I'm putting the house on the market and starting to make my contacts, thinking, who else can they change? That's pretty much it. It's Bob Cooter is, I think, going to be the sacrificial lamb. Is going to be considered the Achilles heel, and that's who they're going to change. It's pure. That's just by process of elimination. That's all that's left that they can change at this point.
Yeah, no, you're right. That you're right. That's low hanging fruit. It's cheap fruit, like you said. It's something you throw to some raw meat to throw to the fan base. You're right. That's you're absolutely correct. I mean, I would be shocked if they did not move on from Cooter. He was, as you indicated in the show notes, he was not not Matt Patricia's choice. He was inherited. That always is a tricky situation to begin with. I mean, there would be absolutely no qualms for the fan base if they did that. You're right. That's probably going to be the first shoe that drops. And they'll ride it out probably the last 4 games with Cooter, then they'll make a move, I'm sure, at the end of the season. It's unlikely that they'd make a move before that, although who knows. But the season's shot anyway, so I don't know what making a move now would do. But, we've seen it happen. Coordinators do get fired in the middle of seasons. It's already happened several times in the league this year. I don't think it's going to happen here, though. I think they'll just ride it out. They'll quietly make their move. I don't even know how long Cooter's contract is. I have no idea what's left on it. I have to look that up. But whatever it is, I'm sure it's easy to swallow. So they'll do that. You're right. They'll make a change there. What's going to be interesting though, Al, is to see what they do in the draft because this year has been such a disappointment. They need help at linebacker. I think they need help in the secondary. They need probably another receiver. I can't believe I'm saying that.
Yeah, think about it. They need a slot receiver. They're probably going to need another safety because Glover Quinn has looked like he's gone from a couple years ago being an all-pro level safety to a guy who looks like he's out of gas. I mean, like he's just hit that wall, Father Time, and just came to a complete stop. Now they need an edge rusher. They need an impact player on the outside, be it a linebacker or a defensive end, someone who can rush the passer. It looks like they're going to need offensive tackle because it looks like Chi Lang, his career, at least as a line, is over thanks to all his injuries, and plus he'll be a salary cap hit because I think he's due $11 million. Which if they let him go, it's only going to cost them like $1 million, something like that. Right. So we're talking a receiver, we're talking offensive line, we're talking defensive line. Even though the interior defensive line is all of a sudden, with the addition of Snacks Harrison, along with Robinson in hand, has all of a sudden become a strength of this team. There's still and let's not even forget about a cornerback. They don't have a number 2 cornerback on this team. They got Darius Slay, and right now they're playing Mike Ford as a second cornerback, who they picked up off the street 3 weeks ago, and now he's outpaced Tease Tabor, the second-round draft pick, who was inactive for the second straight week. So we've already listed 5 areas of need at least on this team, and the season's not even over yet. Who knows what else could end up with needs on this team? But I mean, this team suddenly, look from at the beginning of the year, which we believe a team that could compete for the playoffs, all of a sudden looks like they might be rebuilding. When we start going through needs.
Well, I think, yeah. I mean, sure. Tabor is going to go down as one of the worst draft picks that certainly Bob Quinn's ever made so far in his young career. That was
I think you could make an argument he's like top 10 draft bust for this team.
I mean, it's just been awful.
And remember when Quinn said that I've never personally scouted a player more when he drafted him? Well, okay, but the thing is, it's what he just did not have the measurables. And he came into camp his first year, and there was already from leftover from the combine. Well, he doesn't have the speed. Yeah,
he doesn't have the speed to play at this level. Certainly not worthy of a second-round draft pick. But be that as it may, Al, let's get back to this your notion of rebuilding. Yeah. How do you suppose? I mean, I'm not disagreeing with that because when you and I list all the areas of need, that does kind of smack of a rebuild. But how do you suppose you sell the fan base on a rebuild. How do you do that now? When you no seriously when you bring in you go from 9-7, you're a couple 9-7 years under Caldwell, a couple playoff berths. Then you bring in Patricia. Mm-hmm. Quinn is relatively new, but not too new anymore. But how do you? And then you bring in Patricia last year, ostensibly to take the next step. How do you sell? And you just invested in that big money in Stafford. About 2 years ago was the when they gave him the big contract.
Last offseason, yeah.
Well, okay. How do you then? And not that the Lions themselves would ever use the word rebuild. I mean, I don't think they would ever use that word themselves.
It's a culture change. That's the term they've been using.
How do you? They put themselves in a weird situation here with the new coach and everything. Unless Quinn just has a really good draft and maybe gets lucky in a couple of free agents. There's been some good free agents. Kennard I mentioned last time. I thought was a good one. He brought in Snacks, so forth. But I just don't know how you. I don't know if rebuild is going to be even. That's probably a word that I don't even know if anybody's going to use that word. That's a horrible word to use. I don't know how you rebuild if you keep the same. How do you sell a rebuild if you got the same quarterback? Yeah, that's the first thing. How do you rebuild a guy? I don't know. You have a quarterback for 10, 11 years, and then say you're rebuilding, keep the same quarterback.
And you never got where you wanted to go to begin with.
Right.
With that
rebuilding from what? Rebuilding from what? There's just. Boy, I tell you what. You and I have been following this team for almost 50 years, and there just hasn't been any. There's been so little success in 50 years, 60 years.
How many culture changes have we been through? My goodness.
There just hasn't been they haven't ever had that. They've had periods of time where they've had some pretty good defenses, but their offense stunk. Mm-hmm. They've had some times where their offense was pretty Roman candles going off, and the defense hasn't been living up to its. Mm-hmm. They haven't had a quarterback. They haven't had the right coaching. Boy, I tell you, I just don't. And I'm not even sure. I'm not even sure. I'm not even sure if a change in ownership is even necessarily what the problem. I don't even know. I know people say, "Well, it's until the team is never owned by the." But I tell you what bothered me. Rod Wood was speaking a couple 2 or 3 weeks ago. I can't remember where he was speaking.
Right.
At a public event of some sort, and he just threw out these superlatives. We have a great coach, a great quarterback, a great team. No, you don't want. You can't say that. Mm-hmm. You can't. The fans don't want to hear how great you are when you're not. Number one, and number two, when they haven't seen a champion, when they've seen one playoff victory in 61 years, you don't. Great is the last thing they want to hear as far as you say what you will about the Al Davises of the world. And the Mark Cubans of the world, and some of these bombastic owners, the Steinbrenners of the world. But I tell you what do all those guys have in common? They've won, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're all winners.
Yeah,
all
exactly.
Winners. So you can talk, say, hey, that's not the way to go about it. But all I know is all these loud, boisterous, micromanaging owners have won. Mm-hmm. And they don't go around saying we're great when they're not. If anything, they're going around publicly calling out the team and publicly throwing people under the bus. I know that may not be necessarily what you do either, but all I'm saying is the last thing you want to do is go out there and say how great everything is. And Matt Patricia, we believe in our quarterback. He's a great quarterback, and everybody's great. Everybody's great. Everything's just we've got to. This is it just after a while you can't do that. Now I'm not expecting Matt Patricia to go out there and say our quarterback sucks, but nobody wants to hear how rosy everything is. The more you say how rosy things are when they're obviously not, it's just it's just a boy. You just make a bad situation worse. I think the fans would love it if somebody in that organization would say, I'm tired of this. I'm absolutely tired. If Martha's not going to do it, right? She had her She had her little moment 3 years ago when she got rid of Mayhew and she got rid of Lawand in one fell swoop. I applaud for that.
Yeah.
I even applauded Bob Quinn when he got rid of Jim Caldwell. I thought, okay, that means that maybe the bar has finally been raised a little bit around here.
Yeah.
But
and don't use that term either. But yeah.
Oh yeah, it's another one. But I mean, you just can't. The whole thing is just maybe it is an ownership. I don't know.
Well, you know what? The only way they'll be able to really sell a rebuild is if they move on from Stafford. That's honestly, but they won't do that. And they'll try and sell that we're reloading or culture change. They'll get rid of Cooter. They'll hopefully hire I would love to see them go to one of the hot young offensive minds, maybe someone from the Rams or someone from the Andy Reid tree or something like that. Rather than another Patriots mafia member, but which I would not be surprised if that's what they actually do. But yeah, to sell an actual rebuild or that we need to take a few steps back before we can move forward. I think it really revolves around Stafford, because when you have a quote unquote franchise quarterback, you really can't justify we're in rebuild mode when you're paying a guy almost $30 million a year, and that's the big bugaboo here. And I could just see right now that unless, as you said, unless Quinn hits it out of the park in the draft and in free agency, and they find someone who can fix Stafford again. It looked like Caldwell had done that, but no, we've been through Scott Linehan, we've been through Joe Lombardi, we've been through Bob Cooter, and none of them has been able to solve the enigma that is Matthew Stafford. We've seen gunslinger Stafford, we've seen game manager Stafford, and he's never been able to take that leap from pretty good to great, or okay to great. And I don't know, as you said earlier on in the podcast, it's starting to look like at 30 years old that's never going to happen. So that kind of leads us back in our circle to maybe just cut bait on the quarterback and look for a guy in the draft. I don't know at this point, because I'll just say this: I wouldn't want to be in Bob Quinn's shoes right now. After you got your head coach, the guy you desperately wanted to be a head coach. You're the guy who gave Stafford this huge extension. He's your quarterback. This is now officially your team 3 years into it now, because he should have got rid of Caldwell when he took over the team, but that's water under the bridge.
Right.
So, this is Caldwell's team. This is his mess, and it's what do they say? If it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, it's a duck. Well, if it looks like a rebuild and smells like a rebuild, it's a rebuild. And that's what it's starting to look like with this team. And that's the worst part, where we've seen teams like the Bears, for example, who are in first place of the division. They've been good, then they've been bad. They're good again. How come the Lions aren't on that roller coaster? They've been right on this middle and track, then they go down, and then they get back up to 500, and then that's it. They never take that next step. And as a longtime fan, that is probably the most frustrating thing is seeing other teams, figure this out.
Yeah.
Hell, the Rams were in kind of purgatory for a decade.
Sure.
They hit Sean McVay. So.
And they fired who was widely considered a pretty good coach in Jeff Fisher.
Yeah.
And the Rams,
a Super Bowl coach in Jeff Fisher. So
the Rams were bad as recently as 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And I know that's how the NFL is. Teams bob to the surface, but you're right. There's been no sustained success with the Lions. That's the key. And you mentioned getting close, but never to bust the
winning a damn playoff game. Exactly.
Right. I mean,
I want sometime in my lifetime for this team to win another damn playoff game.
Yeah, and it is annoying. It's not just with the Lions, Al. It seems like with every sport, every of our professional sports teams. It's annoying to watch. It seems like all these other cities can find all these young, dynamic people, whether it's young, dynamic general managers, young dynamic coaches, young dynamic players, young stars left and right. It seems like all those types of elements are on other teams in other cities. We don't have that young dynamic anything here. Yeah. We don't have with the Tigers. We got an old GM and an old manager. We don't have it with the Lions. There's nothing young and dynamic with the Lions whatsoever. There's nothing young and dynamic about the Red Wings. And so I understand the players are young, and I understand they're playing pretty well, but there's still not
very old school front office.
They're still not right. And then the Pistons is we'll see. They're in, that's the one team that
there are signs of life.
We'll see there. We'll see there. But I'm just tired of looking around the sports landscape and seeing all these other teams, like you said, figure it out with these the Sean McVays of the world.
Yeah.
And these young general managers that are in their early 30s that come in and look what Matt Nagy's doing with the Bears.
Bingo, yeah.
With the young quarterback with Trubisky. I'm sick of seeing other teams being able to build these great defenses. Mm-hmm. All these young, athletic, fast players, and the Lions can't do that either.
Yeah.
They can't. It's just I'm tired of seeing it happen in every city except here, and not just with the football team. I mean, just everywhere.
Well, there's this kind of this football malaise in this area right now because obviously the Lions for one, and then Michigan just pulled an absolute dumpster fire of a game against Ohio State, essentially derailing their entire season, to now where it feels like they're playing in a New Year's Six Bowl and everybody's like, big deal. And then you got Michigan State, who has an elite defense and probably the worst offense I've ever seen in my life. So they ended up going to a middling 7-5 season when a lot of people thought they would be a double-digit win team and maybe making a run at the playoffs. All of a sudden, football around here, Greg, well, hey, at least your alma mater is going to a bowl game, so at least there's that. But, it's just that right now football, period, is in a malaise around here. It's either in a malaise or a huge disappointment or some big ball mixed together of all of that. And the Lions are always at the center of it because, they're always just, they just leave you with a feeling of, when is it ever going to happen to us? And you're right, as you said, you see it happen in every other damn city. It just doesn't happen here, and we don't know why. And like you said, I'm not going to blame the Fords because they don't meddle. They're not the types that, they're not Jerry Jones types, or they're not Mark Cuban types, or they always got their fingers in the pie, or God forbid, remember what Ted Turner used to be like when he owned the Braves way back in the day. They're nothing like that. They hire somebody, say, here's a checkbook, do what you need to do. And that's pretty much what the Fords have always done. They have just never been able to find that elite coach or general manager, ever.
I was just Googling, for sure. I was just Googling Bob Cooter, and I typed his name in, and I clicked on the news tab to return all the news results for Bob Cooter. And there's not one result where he's quoted.
Yeah.
Not one. And then I did find something from Click on Detroit, which is Channel 4's website, believe it or not. And they ran a piece November 13th. Where is Bob Quinn? Where in the world is Bob Quinn? He says he has not spoken to the media since the NFL draft and since hiring Matt Patricia. Well, the draft was after hiring Matt Patricia, but since the NFL draft, it says Bob Quinn is so elusive that we only have a few pictures of him. Isn't about time fans heard from him. That's troubling.
Yeah, it is.
You mentioned we were joking. I laughed at it actually. You said a couple weeks ago. You said it turns out that the Patriots' way is Bill Belichick, and that's probably right.
And speaking of that, you can get away with your coach essentially being the face of the franchise when it's Bill Belichick, and I don't even know what the hell the GM of New England is.
Right.
He doesn't because it's Bill Belichick, but it's different around the rest of the league, and for all we know, Quinn's is on vacation somewhere. For all we know. Oh no, wait a second. We do see occasional shots of him, in a suite. I think we saw him Thanksgiving in a suite. But other than that, you're right. It's ridiculous that because you would have to believe the media in this town would, at the very least, take him to task when he gives his end of the year presser, if he even gives one.
Al, you talk about Quinn, and you wonder why he has not. Then you really wonder why he hasn't talked to the media.
Yeah.
what is going on with that? I mean, what and then you look at players who have. Here's the other thing: players who have, as far as him not talking to the media, you can't make him talk to the media. Obviously, right. I don't know why he feels like he has to be so elusive. Mm-hmm. I don't get it. Now, the other troubling thing is players who have left the Lions, gone on to flourish. Eric Ebron, Kyle Van Noy, guys who were just, Van Noy especially.
Yeah.
That's another thing that makes you wonder. That's not, and those are just two guys off the top of my head. There have been other players who have left the Lions. It's two things have happened since you and I have been following this team. Players come to the Lions from winning organizations and don't do diddly you know what.
Yeah.
Or players leave the Lions organization and flourish. Mm-hmm. Those are the two things and like the constants. They never acquire anybody. When's the last time they really acquired somebody who really was a difference maker? From another organization. I'm thinking about the Dre Blyes of the world, Oz Akeem, Damian Woody. I can go through a whole litany of guys.
You could say Golden Tate, and then after that, I don't think there's anybody else on the list.
They always get. Now you can add LeGarrette Blount to the list. They always get all these players who either are past their prime, or have come from winning, quote unquote, winning organizations who. You don't have any impact on this organization whatsoever, and you've had a number of players leave the organization and go to other teams and flourish. And I wonder about that. I mean, what is that about? That's just too many questions. You and I aren't going to solve this.
And I think we want to cover some.
This organization is a complete joke. I mean, that's all there is to it. They're a complete joke.
This is so Lions. They have 4 winnable games left. I would not be surprised if they win. But that they screw up their draft position or something. But at this point, it is what it is. And how about you give me question 2 of the birthday game, and we'll talk about another depressing topic: the Tigers.
Yeah. This player, he's a player, made his name in the world of football. Like I said, he was born in this state in 1940. He was a defender. He started his career with the Denver Broncos, but he was much more well-known as a member of the Raiders. We already determined that. We determined he played defense. Right. He was a coach for the Raiders, not a head coach. He was an assistant coach for the Raiders for 10 years after he retired, and he played in the secondary.
Oh, shit. For the first thing we were saying, but he's not a head coach. That counts as someone like Tom Flores and stuff like that, so... Assistant coach, played in the secondary? Obviously would have played in the 60s.
60s and 70s.
60s and 70s. So he probably would have played under John Madden. Good Lord. I'm
he had a pick 6 in Super Bowl 11.
I can probably picture who that is, but the name is completely... is passing me by. I'm just going to have to hit the reset button and hope for question 3 I can get this, and no prize for me.
No match game.
Oh, good Lord. Oh, hell. I can't be Tom Poston this week, so. All right. Before we get to question 3 of the birthday game, the Tigers made some personnel moves. They non-tendered a couple of veteran players, and they signed a veteran free agent pitcher. So let's start with the free agent pitcher they brought in, Matt Moore, inked to a 1-year, $2.5 million deal. 29-year-old Moore was picked up off the free agent scrap heap. He was, awful last year. 6.75 ERA, a 1.66 whip, a FIP of 5.25. None of that screams difference maker on the mound. That screams, we hope we can fix this guy, maybe flip him if they're lucky. Essentially, and he wasn't even a full-time starter. He was a swing man with the Rangers. It's amazing enough that he still, with those numbers, Greg, he still got over 100 innings in with the team, which I don't know if it says more about Moore, it says more about the Rangers. But Moore does have a pedigree. He was once considered MLB's top pitching prospect. I believe he was a highly ranked young pitcher with the Rays. He made it the All-Star game and finished ninth in the Cy Young Award balloting in 2013. But he's never been the same since he had Tommy John surgery in 2014. Post-surgery, he has literally bounced around baseball with an ERA and FIP more than 2 runs higher than it was pre-injury. Because he was essentially a 3 ERA kind of guy, high 2s, low 3 ERA kind of guy. Ever since the surgery, he's been his ERA and FIP have been in the 5s and 6s, which screams, I don't know what it screams. It doesn't scream this guy's going to be in the rotation next year. Essentially, this guy doesn't seem like he is Mike Fiers or even Francisco Liriano. This signing really doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense to me, because you think that for a couple million more, you might get a more serviceable pitcher than Mike Moore. The guy's been literally awful for 2-3 years now. Well,
this is another organization that's in the middle of a painful transformation. They're, when you're in this kind of a scenario and you're winning is a long way away, and you're trying to find guys off the scrap heap and so forth. You want to spend a lot of money. This is what you get. And he's lefty. He's left-handed. He's left-handed, but he's had some.
Yeah, if you're a lefty, you'll get chances till you're 35, 36 years old.
Right. You're right. He's had some success in the past. That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
It's not going to move the meter. It's not going to sell tickets. I don't know what to say. Tigers are just they're just in a bad way right now. And we knew this. We saw this. You and I. We all, not just you and I. A lot of people saw this coming years ago. We dreaded this. We said they're going to be the Phillies of the American League, and it's coming true. Yeah. It's absolutely coming true. They can't hit. They have no hitters. They have no big bats. Cabrera, you can't count on him.
Yeah,
you can't count.
As Avila said last year, you can't win with a lineup of 200 hitters, which is essentially what they had last year.
And Cabrera can't stay healthy. He can't stay healthy. Period. I get annoyed with players who can't stay healthy. It's not their fault necessarily, but guys who are hurt every single year, it's.
Well, you know what they say? The most important ability is availability.
Yeah.
And that, unfortunately, as good as Cabrera is, he has not been available for. Well, he's been hurt more often than not for the past 5 years. And
I don't want to hear. Last year we heard, well, he's healthy, he feels great, he's going to have a big year. And Gardner said, the ball's coming off his bat, it's making that sound again, and like in spring training, and his power is, I'm down on Cabrera. I don't think the Tigers can count on him.
Yeah.
I don't think you can't count on him. That's the first thing, because he's always hurt. Always hurt. And it's always something else. It's not the same nagging injury that keeps coming back. It's always something else with this guy. And I don't know how many times I made the comparison to Willie Horton. It's the same thing with Willie Horton. Willie was a big, strong, muscular guy, and he had the same problems that Cabrera is having now. There was always something with Willie. Something was always wrong with him. He could hardly ever play a full season without, the one year he did full season, 75, is because he was a full-time DH. He never could stay healthy. He was always hurt, and it was always something different. And it's the same thing with Cabrera. He's always got something wrong with him, whether it's a shoulder, a knee, an ankle. And it's not. I don't think it's because he plays first base. Yeah. You can't say it's because he plays a physically taxing position or he plays the game particularly hard.
Yeah.
He's just got the kind of body, I guess, that it doesn't take much. He got hurt. Didn't he get hurt?
Swinging a bat. And he snapped his bicep.
Swinging a bat.
Yeah.
He got hurt. So you can't count on this guy. We're going to hear all the right things in spring training. He looks
best shape
great.
Of his life, right?
Best shape of his life, and he looks great, and he feels great. I'm going to have a big year, and this is great. The big guy is back, and in mid-June he'll be hurt again, and he'll miss 50, 60 games again. And I'm tired of that. It's not even about the money. I could care less about the money. I don't go to the games anyway. I don't pay the money. It's not my money to spend. It's not about the money. It's about. I'm tired of talking about guys who never play.
Yeah.
I don't care. Play.
Well, you could say the same about Zimmerman as well, who was essentially who's been hurt the entire time he's been here.
If you can't play, I don't want to talk about you. Yeah. I don't want anything to do with you. I only want to talk to players who can stay healthy and can play. And if you can't do that, then I don't talk about you. I don't care who you are. So they can't count on him. They have no offense to speak of whatsoever. I'm not sure how good some of these kids are that are coming up.
And there's still a couple. Most of these kids are at least a year or two or more away. You're
going to see a lot more of these Matt Moore type signings. It's just I'm afraid we're headed toward. We had that period of time from '94 to 2005, essentially, where the team was completely irrelevant.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid now we're 2019 will be 5 years removed from the last playoff appearance.
Right.
I'm afraid that we're headed toward another 10 to 12 irrelevant again. And unless these kids are better than we thought, unless somebody rises to a level we never thought they could. This is going to be a bad team for several more years unless they do what I suggested last week on my WordPress blog, Out of Bounds blog, which is to accelerate this thing and spend some. You and I both talked about this. Yeah. Accelerate this thing, expend some money. The White Sox are talking about going after Manny Machado.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's an opening there being made because I've said the Indians are still talking about trading Kluber right now, for example. But let's move on to the non-tendered side of the equation, where there was one surprise and one non-surprise. Guys who were essentially released, it was either go to arbitration or be released and let them become free agents. And that's what happened with James McCann and Alex Wilson this week. McCann was the starting catcher. Wilson has been I would say a pretty darn solid jack of all trades in the bullpen. He's done everything from close to middle relief to long relief. He even tried a little bit of starting last in spring training last year, but he had a niche in the bullpen. So McCann, I have no problem with them moving on from him. He's getting, and it's not so much about the money. I just think he wasn't very good. He was below league average last year, below replacement level. He was negative .5 WAR. He had his career worst offensive season of a 581 OPS. I said about guys who don't hit for average or power. James McCann was one of them. At 28 years old, he had below average pitch framing and pitch blocking skills. Essentially, what he had a great arm, and that's essentially all they had left at this point. So I could understand the Tigers moving on from him. You can get the same production for less money or similar money. They'll probably ultimately roll with a couple of in-house guys like Greiner and Hicks, and then pick up a veteran free agent. I've seen Matt Reeder's name thrown out there, for example. Someone who will get on a 1 or 2 year contract at cheap money. Because McCann, he's not the future of this team, and he wasn't going to be around when this team is good again. It's, like your time, we're talking 5 years anyway. So, and the one that got me, Greg, was Alex Wilson. He's been solid. He's not been great, but he's not been bad. He's one of those glue guys. You can put him in pretty much any part of the bullpen, and he won't hurt you. He won't. He wasn't great by any stretch of the imagination, but 3.23 ERA, a 1.16 FIP, 3.87 FIP in 4 seasons in Detroit. He was going to get an arbitration, probably make about $3.5 million. So that's the one that doesn't make as much sense to me, unless this team thinks, the minor leagues, we have a ton of arms down there. We need to make room somehow, but couldn't you make room by moving on from guys like Buck Farmer, instead of an actual productive major leaguer than Alex Wilson? What does bother me, though, Greg, is seeing some of the media members, specifically, I think Lynn Henning, Chris McCaskey, Anthony Fennick, are playing they're being cheap and they're getting rid of veteran leadership in the locker room. In McCann's case, I think McCann was all talk and, it was all show, no go when it came to supposed leadership on this team. And how much leadership can you really get from a guy who is bad, is essentially a bad ball player? So I can understand moving on from McCann, not so much Wilson, but the fact that some of these media guys seem to be carrying the water buckets for the Tigers in regard to some of these moves, I think bothers me the most.
Yeah,
because they're all in on the on this style of rebuild. All the beat writers seem to be.
Well, it's the thing to do now. It's trendy. I mean, everybody wants to do it. Everybody wants to tank.
The Giants are going to join that party. I think the Reds are going to join in that party. Everybody's tanking.
They see what's going on with Houston. They see what's going on with Atlanta. The Phillies, to a degree, although they faded badly down the stretch, they really faded badly. The Braves, that's legitimate. The Cubs did it a few years ago. I mentioned the Astros, obviously, but it's not foolproof. It's not foolproof, of course. I mean, you're still taking a risk by doing it. Sometimes you have no choice but to do it. I understand that because of money and so forth. And when you don't have the young players at your disposal, but look at teams like the Yankees, Al, who were able to kind of reinvent themselves on the fly. They really didn't. The Yankees never really went to they sunk.
No.
Before they rose back up again, they didn't even really. They just kind of dipped a little bit. They came right back up because of the Sanchez's of the world and the Judges of the world and so forth. And
they didn't really go out gung-ho on free agents. It's just that they made some very smart moves and some good drafting.
Yeah,
and they weren't picking at the top of the draft either.
Right. So there's different ways that this could be done, and you look at teams like the A's and the Rays, who don't have necessarily very big payrolls, who both won a lot of games last year, a lot more than you thought they were going to win. I never dreamed the A's would get as hot as they did, hotter than a firecracker last year. It was ridiculous. And the Tampa Bay Rays they've traded Longoria, they traded Archer, and they have nobody. That's about the most no-name team in baseball, and they won 90 games.
Yeah.
I don't know how Kevin Cash must be he must be some sort of genius to be able to get 90 wins out of that squad. And the payroll must be
a fraction, about half what the Tigers probably is.
And so once again, this is another scenario, Al, where all this young dynamic, all these young great players, all these young, great players are elsewhere. They're not here.
Yeah.
They're on other teams. All the young, dynamic executives and managers are elsewhere. They're not with the Tigers. There's nobody to really get all that excited. You could throw all the Christian Stewarts out you want in the world. I'm not going to believe it. I'm not going to believe it until I see it, because I haven't seen a dynamic. When's the last time you've seen a young, dynamic, exciting 5-tool ball player come through the Tiger system that you could really get excited about? That you are anticipating. You're bursting to see make his major league debut.
You probably have to go back to Kirk Gibson. Thinking about it.
It's been so long since we've had anybody.
I mean, we've been sold a couple guys that were supposed to be that, but never lived up to it, except the Cameron Maybin, Juan Encarnacion. And neither one of them lived up to that. And we were sold that, for example, on Derek Hill, the high school kid they took out in the first round like 4 years ago. It's become a total bust. So, no, I can't remember the last time going, unless you go back a few decades, to that kind of ball player coming through the system. And
a lot of times, Al, that was kind of, you didn't think about it because the Tigers were competitive for a while. They were competitive in the 80s for the most part. For that whole decade, they were always, at least they had winning records, and you didn't really think about that because they were winning. They were relatively successful in the 80s.
Right.
And in the 90s, they weren't. And then there was a lot of bad teams in the 90s, and that's when all the bad drafting really came home to roost, and the dearth of exciting young ball players was throughout the decade of the 90s and into the 2000s. And then they got a little bit, started to see some success with the Monroes of the world and the Verlanders and the They made some trades.
And when they have really hit on these draft picks, it's almost always been pitchers, like
right.
the Verlanders of the world.
Yeah, but they just haven't really developed on their home from the farm system a really exciting ball player. And I know that the Mike Trouts of the world and the Bryce Harpers of the world and the Yelich's of the world. Right. I know they don't grow on trees, but gosh, other teams seem to be able to do it, and the Tigers aren't able to do it. They haven't really. I would like who would even come close to being. And I understand these are generational players. I understand. Mm-hmm. I know it's not fair to hold up a Mike Trout and say, "Where's the Tigers' brother Mike Trout?" I understand that, but they haven't had anybody even remotely in the vicinity of a Mike Trout that has come up through the system and has been kind of taken the city by storm, has taken the baseball by storm, has been in TV commercials and has been his bases, out there.
An impact everyday player. It's been probably decades.
And even Gibson I love Gibson, but even Gibson really wasn't. Then if
you're talking that, you might be going back.
Gibson was good for the Tigers. He was good because they had players around him. He was not. He was not the face of the
like I said, he never put up all. His counting numbers were never otherworldly or anything like that. He was just all around good. But you're right. He was never. But he was never an all-star. He was never an all-star. Never had 100 RBI. Never had, I think, 30 home runs. That kind of thing. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, if
you're talking that, then maybe you have to go all the way back to Al Kaline.
He was one of those intangible guys who kind of made everybody around him better. He was a great component.
Will the team to win kind of guy.
Right, yeah. But he was not a generational player by any stretch of the imagination. As a matter of fact, you mentioned the All-Star team. I'm wondering, I'm going to look it up right now. I'm wondering, did he even go to the All-Star game the year that he won the MVP award?
No, he didn't.
88? He did not. I'm looking at it.
I don't think he ever went to an All-Star game.
He was an MVP in 88 with the Dodgers.
Right.
He won 2
and even then, his numbers aren't that crazy good.
It's unusual because he was an MVP, won 2 World Series, and he was the ALCS MVP, yet he never made an All-Star team. Not once.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Exactly. But, yeah, you're right. There's this team, when it comes to position players, has always had to find them via trade or free agency. It's very rarely, even the ones they developed, like I said, aren't generational. You can go back to, as good as Nick Castellanos is as a ball player, he's not a generational guy. He's a piece on a decent team. That's the kind of guys. You could go back to Jason Thompson, Steve Kemp, Lance Parrish, maybe Whitaker and Trammell, they're about as close as you can get, I'm guessing.
Well, they
didn't come up. They developed into it as big leaders. They didn't come up as that.
Well, they did it. You got to give them credit for Trammell, Whitaker, and Morris and Parrish. You do have to give them credit for that. Those were indeed.
They were all-star level.
They were all-star guys, and they were guys that were all formed the nucleus of a championship team. So you got to give them credit for that.
Right.
And I do, but they're they have not. There's been a sore lacking of that, so that's why I'm not all that.
Yeah, the position player thing has really been a sore spot with this team. They just don't develop them.
So that's not why. That's why I'm not so jazzed up about this notion that all we have to do now is just tank and just bring up all the kids and we'll be fine, because they have not shown to me, the Tigers, that they have that ability to develop the kind of players that we're talking. It's not an elixir to just say, well, let's just lose 100 games and then in 5 years we'll be good again. That doesn't work out that way. You still have to develop the draft. You still have to hit on these guys. And it might be too soon for me to say that they haven't hit on these guys, because that's not fair. Mm-hmm. I just don't have the confidence that they will because they haven't done it in such a long time.
Yeah, follow the process, but how many teams has that actually worked for? Even the team that coined it is still, the 76ers have still not won anything with the process. So, yeah, it's I don't think either. I think neither one of us are expecting anything from this team this year. And in a lot of ways, I would not be surprised they're This will be a worse year than it was last year because they managed to stay at least semi-competitive through May, into June, and then the wheels kind of came off. But I don't even see that happening this year, especially with that pitching staff. And as you said, in today's game, you have to hit home runs. No one on this team hits home runs. Not even Cabrera anymore. Cabrera's not a power anymore.
Right.
He's a gap hitter. So.
Right.
All right. Let's get question 3 out of the way, Greg, and then we'll call it a night.
1940. Defensive back, Raiders, pick 6 in the Super Bowl against the Vikings. Coached the side for 10 years. I guess the gimme clue would be, without just telling you what his name is, I don't know if I can give you any more than that. He was a 3-time Super Bowl champion. He wore number 24, if that helps you. The all-decade team of the 1970s.
Was this the guy that you always see in the Super Bowl film where he's running down? Yeah, I can't remember his name.
Oh,
I just can't.
Then you're not going to get it. Then
I'm not going to get it. I see him.
Willie Brown.
Willie Brown. Yes.
Willie Brown.
That's it. Okay,
Old Man Willie. That was the call on the Super Bowl film. Old Man Willie.
Well, call me Fanny Flag and knock me silly, but
it happens sometimes. Sometimes,
yeah.
The name just doesn't come
right, it does. What can I say? All right, let's wrap this up. Who's your jerk of the week?
I'm down on Baker Mayfield. The reason why is this kid. He's a young rookie quarterback that is supposed to be leading the Browns out of irrelevance. I get it. I understand that. He's exciting, I guess, to the Browns fans who have not had a quarterback in so many years. Mm-hmm. But, he's got this I'm talking specifically about after Hugh Jackson was fired by the Browns a few weeks ago, he almost immediately went to work for Marvin Lewis on the Bengals staff. Mm-hmm. And as fate would have it, the Bengals and the Browns played about a week or so ago, and the Browns won. And so right away, Mayfield should have been in a good mood. Right. So Jackson comes over. Hugh Jackson, who's on the Bengals staff, comes over to Mayfield to congratulate the kid. I mean, to actually, you could see that he sought Mayfield out. Didn't have to do that. He could have just gone right to the locker room. He sought Mayfield out specifically and said a few words and tried to give him a handshake. And Mayfield just kind of, he did shake his hand. It was a very weak handshake. Yeah. Didn't even look at Hugh Jackson. Didn't even make any eye contact. Mm-hmm. And it was a very uncomfortable looking thing, and then Mayfield doubled down on it later and said, well, the guy tries to get us to play for him, then he goes and joins a team that we play twice a year. Well, first of all, he was the head coach when he was trying to get you to play for him, and secondly, he's free. He's been fired. He can go anywhere he wants. Yeah. There's nothing in his contract that says if we fire you, can't go to a divisional team. You can't go to a team in our own division. I mean, there was nothing like that. That's the way the NFL works, son. You lose a job, you get hired by somebody else. It could be a rival. You could end up working for a rival. It works. That happens all the time.
Yep.
So for him to take this immature, tack and ignore Jackson, basically give him the brush off, and then talk him down afterwards and saying that like Jackson committed some sort of unwritten rule violation. Mm-hmm. First of all, you haven't been in the NFL long enough to even have that kind of a attitude toward anybody. And secondly, what's the problem? He got fired, and so he can't work for a divisional rival? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's pro sports. That's the way it works. And he comes over and seeks you out on an act of goodwill in a game that you won, by the way, and you can't give him I don't know. I just thought that was really lousy. I'm down on him. So my jerk of the week is Baker Mayfield. Yeah,
doesn't it seem like the sports world, or the world in general, just seems to be lacking in people who act like adults?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're right on this. It was just a silly thing for him to even get involved with. Like you said, just shake the hand, move on, and then don't have any comments about it, and that's that, and you move on, and everybody moves on, and we're not talking about it a week later. All right, I'm going for the low-hanging fruit, and that would be the NFL, the Chiefs, and Kareem Hunt for the latest abuse. Well, not allegations at this point. It's been proven as their, again, video. You would think the league would have learned something from the Ray Rice fiasco.
Yeah.
This was the exact same damn thing. Hunt gets into a fight with a woman at a hotel. This is back in February. And apparently the NFL's investigation didn't include speaking to anybody involved. And any witnesses, they really didn't say much of anything, and they let Hunt go on with his career, with his life as a chief. And then this past last couple of days, TMZ, which, if I was the NFL, I'd just hire TMZ as my investigative arm. But TMZ finally comes up with a video of what happened in the hotel that night of Hunt hitting and kicking a woman. And no matter what the circumstances are, there's no excuse for that, especially, a professional athlete, brutalizing a woman, and it bothers me that people are even trying to make excuses for the guy, but just as bad as the NFL, their investigation really wasn't much of an investigation. Essentially, their investigation is we're going to try to not find anything so we can keep our guys on the field. To the Chiefs' credit, after the fact, they didn't just suspend him or fine him; they cut him. They said no, we don't want you on our team anymore. Their excuse was he lied about the situation because apparently no one knew this tape existed other than the hotel and the Cleveland police. It happened in Cleveland. So, in the end, it's like the Groucho Goodell and the NFL said. They looked at the Ray Rice situation and said, let's keep doing that for some reason.
Right.
It's literally a mirror image of the Ray Rice thing, other than, in this case, the player involved is about 10 years younger, a very productive player. Rice was literally at the end of his career, and Rice has never got another chance to play in the NFL. I could see when this all gets settled, right now Hunt is suspended indefinitely. I guess they call it the exempted list in the NFL terms, that he'll ultimately get suspended for 6 games a season or something like that, and then a team will sign him because that's what teams do in the NFL. The NFL has had guys who have Ray Roof who've killed people. They've had guys like Reggie Rogers, I think Larry Little, who have killed people drunk driving. They've had Ray Rices of the world. And yet the NFL just does not do anything about it. So, and it's hard to believe that entity that is worth multi-billions of dollars can't figure this shit out. So that's my jerk of the week. The Chiefs, NFL, and Kareem Hunt for, I just described the reasons why. It's just an ugly, ugly situation, and I wouldn't want a guy like Hunt anywhere near a team I root for.
That is low-hanging fruit, but it's fruit that should be picked for sure. There's no question about that. I don't know if we didn't mention it, but Mike McCarthy was fired today as coach.
Yes, he was. So, and what are the odds are the Packers are a winning team again before the Lions?
Right. Well, we were just talking about accountability and so forth. And boy, just somebody. I remember today somebody tweeted out. I can't remember who it was. Said, "Boy, do you think this is when the Packers were having trouble beating the Cardinals and they lost to the Cardinals?"
Yeah.
Do you think the Packers would fire Mike McCarthy if they lost to the Cardinals at home?
And that's exactly what happened.
Saying it tongue in cheek.
And a couple hours after the game, he was gone.
Because once again, Mason Crosby missed a field goal. He's been bad all year, and then he missed a field goal today, which would have tied the game. And
if he didn't get fired now, he was probably going to get fired at the end of the year anyway. So it's like these things happen. Time runs out on guys, and that's what happened with McCarthy.
It did. So I just wanted to mention that real quick. I wanted to mention.
Well, you said you had a surprise.
Oh, yeah, I have a surprise in a second here. But before I get to the surprise, I want to remind everybody we'll be back with you in 2 weeks on December the 16th. Not sure if we'll have a guest or not. We'll keep you posted on the Knee Jerks page.
We'll probably just yell about the Lions for another hour or so.
The surprise I was talking about, Al, we've got a new member of the family. His name is Bean. There he is, little miniature dachshund.
He's a cutie.
He's got his that's a necktie he got on. He's chewing. But he's the new guy, and he's a little bean burrito. There he is, Bean. So there's our little surprise.
You can't do puppies. That's how they end the podcast on an upper after this downer.
After all that,
let's just bring out the cute animals.
That's right. You call it low-hanging fruit, right?
Yeah.
Remind everybody to watch us or listen to us in a couple of weeks. I'll tell you how to get to the podcast. Follow me on Twitter at Greg Eno. Follow the Knee Jerks on Twitter at the Knee Jerks, and of course the Facebook fan page is facebook.com/the Knee Jerks. I want to, of course, thank my lovely wife Sharon, and thank you, Big Al, for making something that's so gosh darn fun.
Yes, thank you, Greg, for I know you had a lot going on today, and you managed to squeeze the podcast in, so thank you. I'll give a shout out to my girlfriend Linda, who is working as usual tonight, saving people's lives in the ER, or as what happened to her last night, it was so slow, she was actually watching Hulu on her phone, she said. So it probably won't happen again. It doesn't happen too often. And, of course, give a shout out to Bean, of course, for showing up on the show. And, again, and also thank you for your listeners. And with that, you can find us on iTunes. We are on Stitcher. We're on YouTube. Just search the Knee Jerks and do the usual liking and subscribing and all that fun stuff. And, of course, thekneejerks.com will take you right to a direct download if you want to go to the webpage. With that, I think that about covers it. So we'll see you in 2 weeks. So until that time, and maybe, it might be a Jim, we might be celebrating the exit of Jim Bob Cooter by then. But other than that, until that time, this is Al Beaton saying good evening, good luck, and aloha.
Ciao, everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks.